I think there are a lot more neurodivergent anime characters than many creators let on. Particularly, though, let's talk about Mob Psycho 100. If you haven't seen Mob Psycho, first of all, what are you doing right now? Pause this video, watch it, and come back. It's worth watching, I promise you. But I'll go ahead and summarize it for you. Mob Psycho 100 was originally written by the mangaka One, who is also famous for One Punch Man. The manga has a very similar art style and sense of humor to One Punch Man, but is thematically very different. In the story, we watch our main character Shigeo, also known as Mob, navigate middle school and his part-time job as a very, very powerful psychic, who dreams of being like everyone else. Mob is awkward, shy, compassionate, thoughtful, and all in all pretty normal, minus the psychic powers obviously, but the world around him is not. His boss Reagan is an eccentric businessman who uses Mob's psychic powers for money, and the main villains in the series also tend to systemically abuse their psychicness as a way to gain popularity or take over the world. So, in the context of autism, what does this actually mean? Let's answer some questions first. Can Mob accurately and inoffensively be interpreted as autistic? What are some of the motifs one uses that helps us draw this conclusion? What does this all mean? And does it matter? Let's get started by answering the first question. Yes, Mob can accurately and inoffensively be interpreted as autistic. In fact, many people have. I feel like I've sort of tricked you into thinking this was some plain old character diagnosis, but my goal is much more meaningful than that. Ultimately, I want to analyze how the narrative represents Mob navigating the world with this interpreted diagnosis, not just if he has it or not. Because you could even make the same argument that other characters within the series have autism too, but my primary focus will obviously be on Mob because he's the main character. The way that Mob communicates with any other character is such a subtle but meaningful detail, which is even more highlighted by the fact that most everyone is so flamboyant and downright strange. He underreacts, he doesn't make eye contact often, he's not originally part of any clubs or friend groups, and he's frankly pretty bad at reading social cues. Serizawa, a character we meet who is a more stereotypical autistic portrayal, even remarks that Mob is just like him. Someone with a deep desire to be normal so that they can be unquestionably welcomed into society. This specific moment is what gets me. Two characters on the same side of the spectrum who used to walk different paths, merging into a joined realization into self-acceptance. Now, what are some of the motifs, themes, and character arcs that one uses that allow us to draw this conclusion? One of the most obvious symbols in the series is ESP, or psychic powers. Despite it being such a rare, seemingly strange ability, nearly half the cast is seen to have it, and Mob, our narrator, is constantly surrounded by it. It becomes and is an inescapable part of life, and therefore the series. You're probably watching this and going, well, duh, the show is about psychic powers. Why wouldn't it be everywhere? Like, okay, but is it though? Is Mob Psycho really just about psychic powers? ESP, as both a symbol and motif, is ultimately this invisible wall that separates Mob from becoming what he deems as normal. But that isn't apparent for most of the other cast members. Teru and Ritsu, for example, are both incredibly popular. Mob often remarks on how he's somewhat jealous of his little brother's success, and even his fight with Teru shows just how different they are. So what? Am I saying ESP actually isn't a motif for autism, and that this whole video is pointless? Well, no, obviously not. But I would argue that Mob's perceptive flaw of having psychic powers, or in this case autism, is the greatest internal barrier that he has to break, and it's one he only really begins to understand during the Mogami arc in Season 2. There's a sense of humor in this too. Mob inadvertently becomes this cultish god, when in reality he's really just a kid trying to navigate the social climate of middle school. He can do all of these amazing things. Move things with his mind, fight extremely powerful spirits. He can literally save the world. But at the end of the day, he can't even talk to his crush. Like I said before, ESP isn't holding him back. It's hardly even separating him from the world he lives in. What Mob ultimately has to discard within himself is the idea that he can't be popular, or that he can't stand up for himself. He can, and he does. This is an incredibly positive autistic allegory. Not setting aside or abandoning your differences, but embracing them in a way that's really positive for you and the people around you. He brings other psychics to his side through this exact theme. Being an Esper doesn't make you evil, but the world's rejection of you because of your abilities might. So, if ESP is this large, all-encompassing, motific umbrella of the series, what are some visual or thematic cues that fall under it? One recurring visual cue is the 100% countdown that builds up through a few episodes, is expended into a giant emotional explosion, and then builds up again. 100% anger, 100% sadness, 1000% gratitude. And through an autistic mindset, this is actually a really interesting way of visualizing emotions in an otherwise expressionless character. It shows us too that ESP isn't just about psychic powers, but also measures thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Another one is the concept of acceptance. Something about you looks broken, and you must find it within yourself to fix it. I've already talked about this, so I won't harp on it for too much longer, but Mob Psycho 100 is one of the only series I've seen where villain characters are consistently redeemed through an internal journey, similar to the one we see Mob on throughout both seasons. And lastly, failure is not the end. The people you love and the things you care about are the most important things in the world. Okay, so what does this all mean? Does it really matter if one says he's autistic? Well, yes and no. What matters the most is the relationship and love that we have for the series. Mob Psycho 100 is one of the greatest and most positive representations of autism I've ever seen, canon or not. It's so charming and therapeutic to watch a character so different from you navigate problems so similar to your own. Now, I'll leave this video off with one last question. Do you think Mob is significantly hindered because of his differences? Or do you find aspiration in knowing that Mob comes to terms with just being Mob, the protagonist of his own life? So yeah, that's the end of the video. I hope you liked it. This was my very first video essay. I made it for people who are obsessed with Mob Psycho like me, but also for people who have considered watching it. I hope I converted you in some way. I plan on making more video essays in the future, and hopefully longer ones as well. So stay tuned. Subscribe if you want to see more like this. Follow me on Twitter. And that's all. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye!